Good evening from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm, and it's Friday night, so to my Jewish friends, family, and I don't belong to a congregation anymore, but former and perhaps future congregants. Sounds so weird because I can't perceive that I'll ever pray in a temple again, but you just don't know. Stranger things have been known to happen. The Mama T moves between worlds of her own free will by her own design, sometimes with a push and a tweak from the Ein Sof Or, and yes, stranger things have been known to happen. But anyway, Shabbat Shalom if you're of the Jewish faith. I've had a lovely day. It's been a lovely Friday. It was a beautiful sunny day. I went with my friend Lynn to Carindale. We had lunch and looked around the shops, and there was a very high love type energy and well, not just at Carindale but in general today. It was a very high, lovely vibration, and I spoke to a few people and complimented them, and I myself feeling full of a high, loving vibration, which was really quite lovely. I actually said to Lynn, I feel a bit high. I haven't taken anything that would cause that kind of situation, but I was reacting to the love energy. Went into one shop, it was a health shop, because Lynn wanted to buy something in there, and the young woman that served us was just so ebullient and high vibration, awake and aware and alive in her own body, mind and spirit. I couldn't resist telling her so. I said, "You're a lovely girl." I should have called her a woman because she was younger, but she wasn't really a girl anymore. But it just sort of tripped off my tongue that way. I said, "You're a lovely girl, and I want to tell you," I said, "you're so full of vitality and you're alive in there." And I said, "It does my heart good to see." I said, "And you're efficient and professional, and I said, "And you just," how did I put it? I said, "You're just radiant." She said, "Oh, thank you so much." She said, "I've just recovered from a very bad flu and I actually haven't felt all that great." I said, "Well, honey, today you're sparking on all four channels, so," I said, "more power to you." And she was thrilled, And then I was waiting to order my lunch, and there was a Māori woman, a bit younger than me, probably in her early to mid-40s. And we just looked at each other. We were both wearing black and white. She was wearing a geometric, tunic and skirt, and I had it's not geometric, it's kind of got big leaves on it, but I teamed it up with my geometric earrings that, these are old market stock from my mother's, so that I zhuzhed up. So they're very old. They're about, they'd be about 40 years old now, or the gods, perhaps even a little bit more. But anyway, I complimented her. She was a very attractive Māori lady, and I said, "Isn't that cute?" I said, "We're both wearing black and white geometrics." And had a little chat, just being kind to each other, total strangers being kind to each other. And then we were sitting down having our lunch, Lynn and I, and there was at the table next to us was a very young Asian man, probably about 19 or 20, passed out asleep with his head on the table, completely out for the count. And he remained that way through our entire meal, which took us about 10 minutes to eat our meal. And Lynn looks at me and she said, "Is he breathing?" I said, "I don't know. It's very, very still." So we watched him for a while. I said to her, "I think he is breathing." I said, "But I'm a bit worried." She said, "Why?" And I went, "Well, what if he died and we're sitting here next to a dead person?" I said, "He's only young, but after the COVID regime, it's the young you worry about more than the elderly now. She nodded. So we sat a bit longer. I said to Lynn, I need to check on him, but I've got to do it without, I don't want to give him a fright. So I moved because he and Lynn were sitting in one of those kind of bank seats. There was a space between him and her. So I sat between them, and I sat as close to him as I did sit without touching him because I didn't want to freak him out. And normally when you sit close to someone, even when you're asleep, you get it, it's natural for your, when someone's impinging on your personal space, it's quite natural for you to wake up and become hyper aware, especially in a public space. The kid slept through that, even me sitting fairly close beside him, not quite touching. I said to Lynn, this is indeed a bit of a worry. I said, because he should have woken up now that I've moved between you and I'm sitting so close. A natural instinct, self-preservation is to wake up. I said, so we'll leave it a little bit longer, but I said I might actually have to physically wake him. I just want to make sure that he's okay. So we did. We waited another minute or two, and then I very gently put my hand, just 3 fingers of my hand, just on his, between his wrist and his elbow. Just didn't touch him hard, just very gently touched him. And he immediately woke up then, and he sort of looked at me with a start, and I said, I didn't want to frighten you. I said, but you've been sleeping so deeply and keeping so very still. I said, I just wanted to make sure that you're not dead, literally. And I said, I realise you're not dead because, you've woken up, but I said, I just want to make sure you're okay. And then he went, oh. And then he looked at his iPhone, which showed the time was 12:29 p.m. He was in his work uniform. I won't say because people might be able to track it down. I don't want to get him into trouble. But he was working for one of the little restaurants there in the food court. And he looks at the time and he said, I still have time. Bless. Just that bloody exhausted, the poor kid. I said, listen, I know you're okay now and I'll leave you alone. If you need to, you go back to sleep. And he went, okay. Put his head straight down, went back to sleep for a few more minutes, about 5 more minutes. I'm just looking at Lynn, I'm like, this kid's really fucking exhausted. Probably, working several jobs or studying all night and working in a little restaurant during the day. Oh, the poor kid. He was a handsome young man too. I felt sorry for him, but then I remembered it's how I used to exist in the world, even when I was young, perpetually sleeping. It's the reason why I go mosh my entire neck off and make such an art form out of the song Zombie, because I lived like that for 30 years. 30 years. It's a long time to be a zombie. A long, fucking time. But anyway, I'm back now. I'm fully recalibrated, and it's wonderful. And I still get a bit tired quite often because I'm 60 now, but looking at this young man, I said to Lynn, I don't feel so bad about how many years I lost sleeping through life, because here's a young man doing it now. And, so it's obviously I wasn't the only one that lost my youth and vitality, being utterly exhausted. So anyway, he bounced up after another 5 minutes and went back to work. And I said to Lynn, it frightens me when I find them, the young, especially the young ones, sleeping like that in public spaces, because I'm frightened for them. I really am frightened for them, for their health, for the, the transmogrification of their that cult, that global cult that damaged all our young people 5 years ago. Frightens me. I was so bloody relieved to see that he was okay and bounced himself off back to work. I thought, oh, well, that's okay then. But anyway, yes, we had a lovely day. Lynn and I walking around the shops. There's a couple of quite nice looking men of my vintage too. One actually kind of gave me the eye and kind of shot him a look back. I wasn't giving him the eye because not really all that interested, you know. Too many psychopaths and vicious game players have put me off. But I said to Lynn, I must be healing. She said, why? I went, I noticed that one. I said, and there was another man further down on the way to going back to the car. I said, very nicely put together man of my vintage, beautiful, good quality leather jacket, cargo pants, very nice boots, long white beard, and neat, clean beard. And I said, I wasn't interested really, but I noticed him. I said, I'm noticing. So Mama T's back in her chariot of the gods, noticing the occasional handsome man again. And I tell you what, there were years that you could have put someone like Travis Fimmel right beside me and I just would have gone, No, I tell a lie. Travis Fimmel in the Vikings was absolutely beautiful. I think Travis Fimmel, if you sit him next to me, even though I wasn't well in the day, and I probably would have noticed. I'm lying to myself. Travis Fimmel, if you're out there, Mama T still thinks you've got the most beautiful eyes. You're a wonderful actor. Ragnar. We used to watch, my former forensic psych nurse friend and she used to ring me up, come over and watch Vikings with me. It's your movie, Tanya. It's who you really are. I said, you fantasise about these things, Gail. She did have lots of weird fantasies about me, which some of them were quite odd. But anyway, she said, get over, come over. Oh, the other show we watched together was Tudors because she was English. It was a wonderful show. Really enjoyed Tudors as well. But anyway, we'd sit and we'd watch Vikings together, and she'd say, "Oh, Rollo." I went, "Rollo looks a bit like your boyfriend Pedro." She says, "Exactly. Now you get it." And I went, "You should be drooling over Pedro, not some character in Vikings." And she says, "Well, who do you fancy in this show, Tanya?" And I said, I actually quite fancy, Ragnar, Travis Fimmel. I said, he's far too young for me. He's just a lad. But I said, by the gods, he's beautiful. And then later on, I realised that he looked a bit like a young version of my old man. That's probably what the attraction was, which is a bit weird, isn't it? A bit Oedipal. Is it Oedipal? You fancy people that remind you of the father? I think it was the other way around. Oedipus fell in love with his own mother, didn't he? Well, anyway, it's reverse Oedipal. But, no, it's just the expressions, the way he sort of pull his face a certain way. Travis Fimmel would be like, oh, baby, baby, baby. And also, the storyline being Ragnar Lothbrok. I'm fairly certain, and it's not just a fantasy, I'm fairly certain I might have been a Viking in a previous life. I certainly don't fit into contemporary Australian and globalist modern day society. It's all a bit kind of fucked when you think about it, isn't it? But, but on the other hand, I can't be a true Viking because I haven't killed anyone and I don't particularly want to start that nonsense now, do I? Oh. But, Gail used to sit on the couch. We'd get a bit pissed together, her and I, watching Vikings. We'd eat very nice camembert or brie cheese and we'd have some wines. And it was all very, very sophisticated. two lonely older women sitting on each other's couch watching the Vikings. And she'd turn to me and she'd say to me, you know, Tanya, looking at me all lovingly, and I'd be like, oh yes, Gail, what's that? She said, I'm certain you were a shield maiden in previous existence. And I just looked at him and I went, you know, there weren't many shield maidens, and that's kind of exaggerated for the show. She said, I don't care, you were definitely a shield maiden. And then the interesting thing was, not long after that, my wonderful, worthy psychiatrist, who was a wonderful man, very loving and supportive of me in his, in his professional capacity. He said to me, do you know who you remind me of, Tanya Aarons? I said, no. I'm thinking, I thought he was going to mention some TV character too, how you compare your friends to TV characters. He said, you remind me of the Icenian queen, Boadicea. He said, Boadicea, who went to war against the Roman army because they raped her daughters and stole her lands and humiliated her. Yes, he said, Boadicea. And I laughed so much, but you know what? Only in recent years. I've been in therapy with him. It'll be 15 years in October, so it's, what's that, 14 and a half years. Anyway, I went to him about a year or so ago. I said, I've thought about it, doctor. I don't call him doctor, I call him by his first name, but you don't need to know his name. I probably slipped his first name out from time to time because I forget, but you don't need to know that. But anyway, I said, doctor, I've thought about it. What have you thought about, Tanya? I said, you're completely right. I'm the reincarnation of Boadicea, and no one fucks with Boadicea or the Tanya. And we just looked at each other and nodded and smiled. It's true. It's true. He said, it took a lot for Boadicea to finally get angry, an awful lot. He said, and Tanya, when you finally get angry and someone finally crosses the line, you have every right to. And I concur with that. But anyway, I don't have a Roman army to fight, fortunately. Don't have any weapons. I don't have much of an army to back me up if things go awry. But I'm a one-woman, daughter of the warrior goddess, Boadicea. And actually, to be honest, I take great pride in that. Anyway, how did we get onto this, talking about this? Oh yes, Travis Fimmel, and who was the actor that played Rollo? I'm trying to think what his name was. Something, was it Charles Standen or something Standen? I'll have to Google it because, I must have accurate information on my channel. Even though I might be off with the pixies, the information must be true and validated and quantified. Clive, I just remembered I don't need to look at Google. It wasn't Charles, it was Clive Standen. It's funny, I used to hear Gail go on and on. Clive Standen, like it was a mantra or a spell. I said, Gail, if you said his name 1,000 times, he's still not going to come over and fuck you. She's like, I know, but you're such a bitch, Gail. You're such a bitch, Tanya. Yes, well, anyway. I can be a bit of a bitch sometimes because I'm a realist. Don't play games, don't fantasize, don't create barnicides and delusions and fake friendships and fake love. And I won't put a pin in your balloon. Oh, my darlings. My darlings. But yes. Oh, there was one time, this was back in the day when Vikings were still on TV, so, when I was still friends with Gail. I think it was around about 2013, 2014 perhaps. I was up on the top floor of Irish Murphy's, so yeah, it must have been because I stopped going to that filthy establishment in February 2015. But anyways, it must have been late, very late 2013, and I still have to laugh about it now. This is a funny story I'll share with you. It's quite delightful. So I'm dancing upstairs in the Irish, what used to be, I don't know if it's still there because I haven't gone back there since 2015, but nor do I want to. But anyway, the top floor used to be the nightclub part of the pub, and you went up there when the live bands finished on the ground floor. So the live bands had finished, which meant they used to finish at around about 2 in the morning. And so we would go up, my friends and I, to the nightclub upstairs, and we would dance from 2 until 4 or 5 in the morning, and then it was kick-out time, basically. So we would dance all night long, some weekends. It was quite phenomenal what we used to do. Of course, I used to be leaving my body and flying all over that place because I was exhausted, especially with my sleep apnea untreated back in the days. Anyway, it's amazing how I used to do things. Really amazing. But anyway, I digress. So it must have been about, just after 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm up there at the nightclub, and I didn't feel comfortable up there. It was kind of, it was always the last minute hookups for the sleaze bags that were desperate, and they hadn't picked you up by 2. They'd go up there and really someone used to try and just about rape you. It was appalling. But of course, I was well aware of that, so I was kept my back and my ass to the wall, you understand. I was always ready for war too. My Bodicea and persona that had already been brought to the fore because protection people are there. The security at the Irish Murphys were shit, by and large. Very, very shitful. Just turn a blind eye and leave you to just get molested or raped or something horrible happened to you, and then didn't really fucking care. It was awful. So, which is why I won't go back there again. They were just awful to me how they behaved. Anyway, so, and I don't just blame security for that either. I blame the owners of that pub and I blame the management because they all stood by and did nothing. So it was venal. Anyway, that was then, this is now. But the story I'm trying to tell you, we'll get there, was, so I'm upstairs at the nightclub and, one of my little girlfriends who was quite loose in the caboose and very generous with her JJ, just saying, which didn't bother me because she was younger than me, High libido of the young and often the highly intelligent goes hand in hand. So it didn't bother me because I wasn't bothered. I'm just dancing, there to dance. So I kind of have to laugh though. So I'm standing literally with my back against the wall because it's after 2 and it's, the fuck fest hour between 2 and 3 when it's not last drinks, it's last opportunity to hook up because they're all desperate and terrified to go home alone and, fail again for another weekend. It was really about failure for a lot of those men. They didn't give a shit about us women. It was just getting their end in and not wanting to look like a failure and a loser going home alone again. It doesn't bother me to go home alone. I'd rather go home alone and be safe and nurtured in my own little bed, and if I was to take a lover, be it with a man I'm safe with and cherished and cared for and respected, am I right? Still those fucking things I used to draw into my life back in the day. But anyway, so I'm well aware of all this. Now, back to the law. And I see this very handsome, but he was younger than me, he was too young for me. In those days I was 47, 48, and about that age. And this young man appears on the opposite side of the nightclub, the room, and all the men are kind of all lined up. It really was like shark feeding frenzy. And I'm taking all this in, thinking, oh, here come the sharkies, the crocodiles and the piranhas. They're all ready to feast on you from the ankles up and devour you, energetically if not sexually and physically. But it was. Anyway, but this young man just appears in front of me, came out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from. I hadn't seen him down in the, where the live music, where the live bands was played downstairs. So I must have sorted him from another club or perhaps from the casino across the road, And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, you are fucking gorgeous. And I very rarely think that of a man. If I tell a man that I think he's gorgeous and a woman's with me, sit up and take notice. I've maybe told men that. It's maybe 3 men in my entire life that I've ever said, I think you're gorgeous. I'm just usually like, act like I don't care, because by and large I don't really have too many psychopaths in my life. But anyway, I'm looking at this younger man. He was too young for me. I was pushing 50 in those days. He would have been early 30s. It would have been, just slightly a bit older than my daughter's age. And but he was a gorgeous young man. And he had his hair done all Viking, tattoos, very nice tattoos, beautiful face. And actually, can't even remember what exactly he looked at. And he was looking at me from across the room. And I'm thinking, why are you looking at me, this plumpy little old lady? It always astonishes me when a man's actually, attracted to me, even now that I'm old, because I just never really realised that I was attractive. My psychiatrist actually told me that. He said, you were never aware of your feminine mystique and your attractiveness, Tanya. I said, no, I really wasn't. I always thought that, because I'd been brutalised so often, that I must be like really ugly and somehow give off a vibe that I'm unworthy of love. And there's an undercurrent of that. I still have that feeling to this day, that I'm somehow just, not quite up to scratch and somehow not quite worthy. And as soon as men get that sensation from me, because they really are like piranha, they prey on you, the vulnerable and the fragile that they perceive to be weak. It's like they can smell the blood in the pool, and as soon as they think that you have a little bit of a feeling that you're not quite up to scratch and not quite got it all, bing, bang, boom, baby, they start attacking you and humiliating you in public and stripping you down to bare bone and driving you to the brink of suicide, because for them it's entertaining, because they're fucking assholes. Men like that. Just saying. But anyway, this little handsome young Viking man, I'm standing there in full femme fatale glory, looking all confident and proud, but eyeing him off because he was a very pretty boy. Wasn't going to do anything with him because he was old enough to be my son anyway. Just having, admiring the beauty of a vital, young, modern day Viking type. So he's looking at me and I'm looking at him. And this former casual partner turns up, takes one look at me, looks over to where my eyes are looking at, sees the young Viking, saunters, you had to go all around the room, he literally slippery sidewinded all around the room, came up to me. That guy's name was Pete. Solo lemonade man, so cheap he couldn't leave me with a $2 bottle of lemonade. The cheap cunt. But you know, another example of a man who thought, I'll just use her and rut her and chuck her away like dirt. You know, another example of that. Filthy it was. Filthy. But anyway, what do I care ultimately now? I'm old now, I don't care. But it hurt back in the day. It hurt to be treated like that. Like some unworthy fucking animal. These fucking incels that have nothing to offer a woman but the end of their knob and their abuse dynamics. Worthless, feckless, trash. It's what they were then and no doubt still are. But anyway, Pete comes up, sidles up literally like a sidewinder. I said, what do you want, Pete? Because I wasn't happy with him because, you know, I'd had an encounter with him before and just been used by him really. He says, Tanya, I just thought I'd come over to say hello. I said, can you explain to me why you slippery sidewinded all along the walls of this building to approach me? I said, aren't you man enough to walk across the room to a woman and speak to her mano a mano like a real man? Oh, Tanya, you're so funny. I went, no, it's inappropriate how you slided away, slithering along like some giant bloody worm. Oh, why are you such a bitch, Tanya? I said, mate, I haven't even warmed up yet. He just looked at me. How have you been anyway? I said, I've been good. How have you been? Oh, yeah, I've been pretty good. Ah, I said, oh, that's good. He says, who's that young dude you're looking at over there? I said, who says I'm looking at that young dude? He says, I noticed. So what's it got to do with you, who I look at in the club? Indeed, what's it got to do with him? Nothing. It's not like we were, you know, partners. He says, oh, I'm just curious. He says, I'm going to go over and say hello. I said, what for? What are you competing for? You know, he's a kid to start with. He says, oh, I just think he looks interesting and I want to meet a man that interests you, Tanya. I said, why is that, Pete? He says, well, he says, not too many men interest you. I said, how do you know that, Pete? He says, I know. I'll give him that. He was a bit astute. So I nodded. And I watched him walk directly from me across the floor in a direct line to piss me off, the slippery little sidewinder. Directly goes up to young Viking dude, still looking at me from across the room. Raises his eyebrows. Thought I sent him over. And I go bright red because I didn't send him over. I was embarrassed as fuck. And so I'm just going bright red and I just raised my eyebrows too and went to let him know it wasn't my plan. Anyway, Pete shakes his hand, you know that blokey thing when men shake each other's hands as to say, yeah, I've had her and if you're going to have her, we better shake hands over this. You're literally treated like you're some kind of carcass that's been strung up at the local, you know, slaughterhouse, the local meat shop, and you're just a rump of fucking humpity steak to them. It's vile, isn't it? Women of Earth I'm talking to here. All the men watching this will be like, nah, it's not vile. We've been doing that since time immemorial. Like, no, fuck off. Seriously, this is for the ladies tonight. So anyway, I mean, you kind of have to laugh. So watching Pete, who's, short and dark and very charismatic man, that's how I ended up having that brief interlude with him. He had a certain je ne sais quoi, apart from being, a rubber band man and a cheap cunt for a $2 lemonade. So, how does this shit even happen to me? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't. But anyway, here's one of the reasons I've stopped having sex. I just thought, oh, what's the point? Wasting my libido and my beautiful outfits and my perfume, my charisma and my vivacity on dead shits. Literally dead shits. So anyway, you kind of have to laugh. It's not really funny, but I can see the funny side of it now after all these years. So young Viking dudes looking at him and chatting amicably, and then they both turn and look at me. And I'm thinking, I think it's time I go now. This is just too fucking weird and creepy. So then Pete walks across the room again in a direct manner. I went, oh yeah, I said, so what are you doing here? I said, I'm working the room. He says, are you? I went, yeah, I'm sussing out who's handsome and who's not. I've got it all worked out. And he's getting all intrigued and kind of turned on, actually. Weird motherfucker. And he goes, oh, well, who are you interested now? I said, you'll never know. You've already ruined it for me permanently with that one. And I said, you're lucky I've decided that he was too young for me. I said, I'd have to break your neck now. And he laughed. He was like, oh, you are funny, Tanya. He said, I was just telling him how, you're a wonderful woman. And blah. I said, no, you weren't. You were placing bets. Which one of you were going to knock me off for the night? How'd you know that? I said, do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I came up on the down train? I said, do you think I got flushed out of the last downpour and the last sewer dump? I said, I know exactly what you men were talking about. He said, how do you know? I said, I am a master of body language. Which I kind of am, because I grew up with, a German mother and a de facto stepfather who was Dutch, and they used to speak in, German, and him in Dutch and her in German, and they didn't want me to know what they were talking about. So I'd just sit there and watch all their body language and work out, get a kind of a feel of what they were saying behind my back in front of my face, you understand. The joys of, being a second generation of migrants, English-speaking, countries. You learn very quickly to decipher what the first generation foreigners are talking about. I think my mother used to get these, her German friends over, and they'd talk in German, sotto voce, and whisper about me. I mean, I know what you're talking about now. No, you don't. And then I'd repeat verbatim what I believed they were saying. And even her friends would turn and look and went, that's exactly right. How did you know that? I went, I'm not stupid. Don't underestimate me. Anyway, the funny thing is, yes, so Pete was still hoping to somehow pick up where we'd left off kind of the year prior. Why would I give you another chance? You know what? Do you want to know something really funny? A couple of years later, I did give him another chance too. That was the lemonade incident. Now, after that, I said, don't ever cross my path again. Ever. Don't even sniff next to me. He didn't dare. He didn't fucking dare. So, Pete, wherever you are, keep sniffing, boy chick. But anyway, that Viking, that young Viking man, he was so freaking intrigued, looking at me like this, and I'm looking at him. I tell you what, It must have been a past life thing. It was very, very unusual. And the fact that Pete got involved in it was also very unusual. Why are you getting involved in this? I'm not going to race him off. It could be one of my sons. He says, oh, he's into you. I'm like, really? This? Here I am standing there in my corset and looking very sexy. I said, really? I said, I'm old enough to be his grandmother. Just about, don't be ridiculous. So, missed opportunity, isn't it? When I think about the missed opportunities, I could just laugh because, it's probably lucky. I didn't get involved. Anyway, we're 40 minutes in, and I wanted to continue reading from Somerset Maugham. And here we go, babies. Do you want to have a bit of a giggle? Guess what? Today's story is titled The Facts of Life. This will be fun. Synchronicity and all. Right, here we go. It was Henry Garnet's habit, on leaving the city of an afternoon, to drop in at his club and play bridge before going home to dinner. Somerset Maugham certainly liked his bridge, didn't he? My bloody tea's gone cold while I was telling you that story. I won't bother heating it up, I'll do it later. He was a pleasant man to play with. He knew the game well, and you could be sure that he would make the best of his cards. He was a good loser, and when he won, was more inclined to ascribe his success to his luck than to his skill. He was indulgent, and if his partner made a mistake, could be trusted to find an excuse for him. It was surprising then on this occasion to hear him telling his partner with unnecessary sharpness that he had never seen a hand worse played, and it was more surprising still to see him not only make a grave error himself, an error of which you would never have thought him capable, but when his partner, not unwilling to get a little of his own back, I'll just check something here, sorry. Sorry. Not unwilling to get a little of his own back, pointed it out, insisted against all reason with considerable heat that he was perfectly right. But they were all old friends, the men he was playing with, and none of them took his ill humour very seriously. Henry Garnet was a broker, a partner in a firm of repute, and it occurred to one of them that something had gone wrong with some stock he was interested in. "How's the market today?" he asked. "Booming. Even the suckers are making money." It was evident that stocks and shares had nothing to do with Henry Garner's vexation, but something was the matter that was evident too. He was a hearty fellow who enjoyed excellent health. He had plenty of money. He was fond of his wife and devoted to his children. As a rule, he had high spirits, and he laughed easily at the nonsense they were apt to talk while they played. But today he sat glum and silent. His brows were crossly puckered, and there was a sulky look about his mouth. Presently, to ease the tension, one of the others mentioned a subject upon which they all knew Henry Garnet was glad to speak. "How's your boy, Henry? I see he's done pretty well in the tournament." Henry Garnet's frown grew darker. "He's done no better than I expected him to." "When does he come back from Monty?" "He got back last night." "Did he enjoy himself?" "I suppose so. All I know is that he made a damned fool of himself." "Oh, how?" "I'd rather not talk about it if you don't mind." The three men looked at him with curiosity. Henry Garnet scowled at the green baize. "Sorry, old boy. You call." The game proceeded in a strained silence. Garnet got his bid, and when he played his cards so badly that he went 3 down, not a word was said. Another rubber was begun, and in the second game Garnet denied a suit. "Having none?" his partner asked him. Garnet's irritability was such that he did not even reply, and when at the end of the hand it appeared that he had revoked, and that his revoke cost the rubber, it was not to be expected that his partner should let his carelessness go without remark. "What's the devil's the matter with you, Henry?" he said. "You're playing like a fool." Garnet was disconcerted. He did not so much mind losing a big rubber himself. I hope they're talking about bridge here. But he was sore that his inattention should have made his partner lose too. He pulled himself together. "I know, sorry, Well, the story is called The Facts of Life, so that's all I have to say about that. I'd better not play any more. I thought a few rubbers would calm me, but the fact is, I can't give my mind to the game. To tell you the truth, I'm in a hell of a temper." They all burst out laughing. "You don't have to tell us that, old boy. It's obvious." Garnet gave them a rueful smile. "Well, I bet you'd be in a temper if what's happened to me had happened to you. As a matter of fact, I'm in a damned awkward situation, and if any of you fellows can give me any advice how to deal with it, I'd be grateful." "Let's have a drink and you tell us about it. With a KC, a Home Office official, and an eminent surgeon, if we can't tell you how to deal with a situation, nobody can." The KC got up and rang the bell for a waiter. By KC, I think they mean King's Counsel. "It's about that damned boy of mine," said Henry Garnet. Drinks were ordered and brought, and this is the story that Henry Garnet told them. The boy of whom he spoke was his only son. His name was Nicholas, and of course he was called Nicky. Of course. Never mind. It's the English. The English you understand. He was 18. The Garnets had 2 daughters besides, one of 16 and the other of 12, but however unreasonable it seemed, for a father is generally supposed to like his daughters best, and though he did all he could to show his preference, there was no doubt that the greater share of Henry Garnet's affection was given to his son. He was kind in a chaffing, casual way to his daughters, and gave them handsome presents on their birthdays and at Christmas. But he doted on Nicky. Nothing was too good for him. He thought the world of her. He could barely take his eyes off her. You could not blame him, for Nicky was a son that any parent might have been proud of. He was 6'2", lithe but muscular, with broad shoulders and a slim waist, and he held himself gallantly erect. He had a charming head, well placed on the shoulders, with pale brown hair that waved slightly, blue eyes with long dark lashes under well-marked eyebrows, a full red mouth, and a tanned clean skin. I think by clean he means he wasn't tattooed. Maybe. Or he just might have just meant that he was clean. I think he meant that he was free of tattoos. When he smiled, he showed very regular and very white teeth. He was not shy, but there was a modesty in his demeanour that was attractive. In social intercourse, he was easy, polite, and quietly gay, and I'm sure by that they mean cheerful, although, that word's been around a long time. He was the offspring of nice, healthy, decent parents. He'd been well brought up in a good home. He had been sent to a good school, and the general result was as engaging a specimen of young manhood as you were likely to find in a long time. You felt that he was as honest, open, and virtuous as he looked. He had never given his parents a moment's uneasiness. As a child he was seldom ill and never naughty. As a boy he did everything that was expected of him. His school reports were excellent. He was wonderfully popular, and he ended his career with a creditable number of prizes as head of the school and captain of the football team. But this was not all. At the age of 14, Nicky had developed an unexpected gift for lawn tennis. This was a game that his father not only was fond of, but played very well, and when he discerned in the boy the promise of a tennis player, he fostered it. During the holidays, he had him taught by the best professionals, and by the time he was 16, he had won a number of tournaments for boys of his age. He could beat his father so badly that only parental affection reconciled the older player to the poor show he put up. At 18, Nicky went to Cambridge, and then Henry Garnet conceived the ambition that before he was through with the university, he should play for it. Nicky had the qualifications for becoming a great tennis player. He was tall, he had a long reach, he was quick on his feet, and his timing was perfect. He realised instinctively where the ball was coming and, seemingly without hurry, was there to take it. He had a powerful serve with a nasty break that made it difficult to return, and his forehand drive, low, long, and accurate, was deadly. He was not so good on the backhand, and his volleying was wild, but all through the summer, before he went to Cambridge, Henry Garnet made him work on these points under the best teacher in England. At the back of his mind, though he did not even mention it to Nicky, he cherished a further ambition. to see his son play at Wimbledon and, who could tell, perhaps be chosen to represent his country in the Davis Cup. A great lump came into Henry Garnet's throat as he saw in fancy his son leap over the net to shake hands with the American champion whom he had just defeated, and walk off the court to the deafening plaudits of the multitude. It's sweet how parents have these dreams and ambitions for their kids and, living vicariously through your kids. I must admit I did that a bit, with my daughter being an actor for a while, till it all turned ugly in 2023. And she didn't want me at her plays anymore. So, fuck that shit. It's awful how I was treated, but it is what it is. As an assiduous frequenter of Wimbledon, Henry Garnet had a good many friends in the tennis world, and one evening he found himself at a city dinner sitting next to one of them, a Colonel Brabazon, and in due course began talking to him of Nicky and what chance there might be of his being chosen to play for his university during the following season. "Why don't you let him go down to Monte Carlo and play in the spring tournament there?" said the Colonel suddenly. "Oh, I don't think he's good enough for that. He's not 19 yet. He only went up to Cambridge last October. He wouldn't stand a chance against all those cracks. Of course Austin and Von Krum and so on would knock spots off him. But he might snatch a game or two, and if he got up against some of the small fry, there's no reason why he shouldn't win 2 or 3 matches. He's never been up against any of the first-rate players, and it would be wonderful practice for him. He'd learn a lot more than he'll ever learn in the seaside tournaments you enter him for." "I wouldn't dream of it. I'm not going to let him leave Cambridge in the middle of a term. I've always impressed upon him that tennis is only a game and it mustn't interfere with work." Colonel Brabazon asked Garnet when the term ended. "That's all right. He'd only have to cut about 3 days. Surely that could be arranged. You see, 2 of the men we were depending on have let us down, and we're in a hole. We want to send as good a team as we can. The Germans are sending their best players, and so are the Americans." "Nothing doing, old boy. In the first place, Nicky's not good enough, and secondly, I don't fancy the idea of sending a kid like that to Monte Carlo without anyone to look after him. If I could get away myself, I might think of it, but that's out of the question." "I shall be there. I'm going as the non-playing captain of the English team. I'll keep an eye on him. You'll be busy, and besides, it's not a responsibility I'd like to ask you to take. He's never been abroad in his life, and to tell you the truth, I shouldn't have a moment's peace all the time he was there." They left it at that, and presently Henry Garnet went home. He was so flattered by Colonel Brabazon's suggestion that he could not help telling his wife. "Fancy his thinking Nicky's as good as that. He told me he'd seen him play, and his style was fine. He only wants more practice to get into the first flight. We shall see the kid playing in the semi-finals at Wimbledon yet, old girl." To his surprise, Mrs. Garnet was not so much opposed to the notion as he would have expected. After all, the boy's 18. Nicky's never got into mischief yet, and there's no reason to suppose he will now. There's his work to be considered, don't forget that. I think it would be a very bad precedent to let him cut the end of term. But what can 3 days matter? It seems a shame to rob him of a chance like that. I'm sure he'd jump at it if you asked him. Well, I'm not going to. I haven't sent him to Cambridge just to play tennis. I know he's steady, but it's silly to put temptation in his way. He's much too young to go to Monte Carlo by himself. You say he won't have a chance against these crack players, but you can't tell. Henry Garnet sighed a little. On the way home in the car it had struck him that Austen's health was uncertain and that Von Cram had his off days. Supposing, just for the sake of argument, that Nicky had a bit of luck like that, then there would be no doubt that he would be chosen to play for Cambridge. But of course, that was all nonsense. Nothing doing, my dear. I've made up my mind and I'm not going to change it. Mrs. Garnet held her peace. But next day she wrote to Nicky, telling him what had happened, and suggested to him what she would do in his place, if, wanting to go, he wished to get his father's consent. A day or two later, Henry Garnet received a letter from his son. He was bubbling over with excitement. He had seen his tutor, who was a tennis player himself, and the provost of his college, who happened to know Colonel Brabazon, and no objection would be made to his leaving before the end of term. They both thought it an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. He didn't see what harm he could come to. And if only, just this once, his father would stretch a point, well, next term, he promised faithfully, he'd work like blazes. It was a very pretty letter. Mrs. Garnet watched her husband read it at the breakfast table. She was undisturbed by the frown on his face. He threw it over to her. I don't know why you thought it necessary to tell Nicky something I told you in confidence. It's too bad of you. Now you've thoroughly unsettled him. I'm sorry. I thought it would please him to know that Colonel Brabazon had such a high opinion of him. I don't see why one should only tell people the disagreeable things that are said about them. Of course, I made it quite clear that there would be no question of his going. Could be no question of his going, sorry. You've put me in an odious position. If there's anything I hate, it's for the boy to look upon me as a spoil-sport and a tyrant. Oh, he'll never do that. He may think you rather silly and unreasonable, but I'm sure he'll understand that it's only for his own good that you're being so unkind. Christ, said Henry Garnet. His wife had a great inclination to laugh. She knew the battle was won. Dear, oh dear, how easy it was to get men to do what you wanted. For a parent's sake, Henry Garnet held out for 48 hours. But then he yielded, and a fortnight later Nicky came to London. He was to start for Monte Carlo next morning, and after dinner, when Mrs. Garnett and her elder daughter had left them, Henry took the opportunity to give his son some good advice. I don't feel quite comfortable about letting you go off to a place like Monte Carlo at your age, practically by yourself, he finished. But there it is, and I can only hope you'll be sensible. I don't want to play the heavy father, but there are 3 things especially that I want to warn you against. One is gambling. Don't gamble. The second is money. Don't lend anyone money. And the third is women. Don't have anything to do with women. If you don't do any of those 3 things, you can't come to much harm, so remember them well. All right, Father, Nicky smiled. That's my last word to you. I know the world pretty well, and believe me, my advice is sound. I won't forget it, I promise you. That's a good chap. Now let's go up and join the ladies. Nicky bet neither Austen nor Von Krum in the Monte Carlo tournament, but he did not disgrace himself. He snatched an unexpected victory over a Spanish player and gave one of the Austrians a closer match than anyone had thought possible. In the mixed doubles, he got into the semi-finals. His charm conquered everyone, and he vastly enjoyed himself. It was generally allowed that he showed promise, and Colonel Brabazon told him that when he was a little older and had had more practice with first-class players, he would be a credit to his father. The tournament came to an end, and the day following he was to fly back to London. Anxious to play his best, he had lived very carefully, smoking little and drinking nothing, and going to bed early. But on his last evening, he thought he would like to see something of the life of Monte Carlo, of which he had heard so much. Uh-oh. An official dinner was given to the tennis players, and after dinner with the rest of them, he went into the sporting club. It was the first time he had been there. Monte Carlo was very full, and the rooms were crowded. Nicky had never before seen roulette played, except in the pictures. In a maze, he stopped at the first table he came to. Chips of different sizes were scattered over the green cloth in what looked like a hopeless muddle. The croupier gave the wheel a sharp turn and with a flick threw in the little white ball. After what seemed an endless time, the ball stopped, and another croupier, with a broad, indifferent gesture, raked in the chips of those who had lost. Presently, Nicky wandered over to where they were playing 30 et 40, but he couldn't understand what it was all about, and he thought it dull. He saw a crowd in another room and sauntered in. A big game of baccarat was in progress, and he was immediately conscious of the tension. The players were protected from the thronging bystanders by a brass rail. They sat round the table, 9 on each side, with the dealer in the middle and the croupier facing him. big money was changing hands. The dealer was a member of the Greek syndicate. Nicky looked at his impassive face. His eyes were watchful, but his expression never changed whether he won or lost. It was a terrifying, strangely impressive sight. It gave Nicky, who had been thriftily brought up, a peculiar thrill to see someone risk £1,000 on the turn of a card, and when he lost, make a little joke and laugh. It was all terribly exciting. An acquaintance came up to him. "Been doing any good?" he asked. "I haven't been playing." "Wise of you. Rotten game." "Come and have a drink." "All right." While they were having it, Nicky told his friends that it was the first time he'd ever been in the rooms. "Oh, but you must have one little flutter before you go. It's idiotic to leave Monty without having tried your luck. After all, it won't hurt you to lose 100 francs or so." "I don't suppose it will, but my father wasn't any too keen on my coming at all, and one of the 3 things he particularly advised me not to do was to gamble." But when Nicky left his companion, he strolled back to one of the tables where they were playing roulette. He stood for a while looking at the losers' money being raked in by the croupier, and the money that was won paid out to the winners. It was impossible to deny that it was thrilling. His friend was right. It did seem silly to leave Monty without putting something on the table just once. It would be an experience, and at his age, you had to have all the experience you could get. He reflected that he hadn't promised his father not to gamble. He'd promised him not to forget his advice. Just going to check something. There's a bit of a strange scent coming through, and I'm not sure what it is. It's not me, so I'm just going to have a quick wander through the house. While I'm out there, I'm going to heat up my tea. very odd. It's very odd, people of Earth. I made a lovely soup for dinner. I woke up this morning. I saw it was yesterday morning because I told my psych about it. Dreaming about vegetables and being basically told by my subconscious or my higher mind or, you know, the angels or the spirits or the ancestors that love me to eat more vegetables. So I made a soup tonight with, cooked chicken, but I threw in, it was meant to be chicken and corn soup, but I kind of add more things to it. So I threw in some celery and mushrooms and spices, and so maybe that's what I'm smelling, but it's weird that I'm smelling it now, and I had that meal like at 8 o'clock. Oh no, that can't be right. Yeah, around about 7:30, 8 o'clock-ish. So, yeah, anyway, because it was such a strong, wafting kind of aroma, I just thought I'd better check that everything's safe, everything's fine. Anyway, bottoms up, I'm going to have a cup of tea. Carry on with the story. It's a bit too hot now, but oh, say la vie, babies. Right. Where were we? Oh, that's right. So Nicky had promised himself, had remembered that hadn't promised his father not to gamble. He'd promised him not to forget his advice. So he's semantics, playing with the truth a little bit, the little bugger, as you do when you're a teenage boy and you're in a strange town and it's all glitzy like Monte Carlo would be a temptation. Father should have known better. He should have said, here's £100. If you blow it, you blow it. Go and have fun, kid, and be more real about it, instead of setting a temptation like that in his way. Anyway. Right. It wasn't quite the same, was it? He took £100 note out of his pocket and rather shyly put it on number 18. He chose it because that was his age. With a wildly beating heart, he watched the wheel turn. The little white ball whizzed around like a little demon of mischief, and the wheel went round more slowly. The little white ball hesitated. It seemed about to stop. It went on again. Nicky could hardly believe his eyes when it fell on number 18. Beginner's luck. A lot of chips were passed over to him, and his hands trembled as he took them. It seemed to amount to a lot of money. He was so confused that he never thought of putting anything on the following round. In fact, he had no intention of playing any more. Once was enough, and he was surprised when 18 again came up. There was only one chip on it. By George, you've won again, said a man who was standing near him. Me? I hadn't got anything on. Yes, you had. Your original stake. They always leave it on unless you ask for it back. Didn't you know? Another packet of chips was handed over to him. Nicky's head reeled. He counted his gains. 7,000 francs. A queer sense of power seized him. He felt wonderfully clever. This was the easiest way of making money that he had ever heard of. Uh-oh. All the gamblers watching this video just went, uh-oh, he's hooked babies. He's a goner. He's going to lose all his money. We already know that, don't we, boys and girls? Sucker. Anyway. His frank, charming face was wreathed in smiles. His bright eyes met those of a woman standing by his side. She smiled. "You're in luck," she said. She spoke English, but with a foreign accent. "I can hardly believe it. It's the first time I've ever played." Oh, bless. Oh, the poor kid. Double sucker. "That explains it. Lend me 1,000 francs, will you? I've lost everything I've got. I'll give it you back in half an hour." "All right." She took a large red chip from his pile and with a word of thanks disappeared. The man who had spoken to him before grunted. "You'll never see that again." Nicky was dashed. His father had particularly advised him not to lend anyone money. What a silly thing to do. But to somebody he'd never seen in his life. But the fact was, he felt at that moment such a love for the human race that it had never occurred to him to refuse. And that big red chip, it was almost impossible to realise that it had any value. Oh well, it didn't matter. He still had 6,000 francs. He'd just try his luck once or twice more, and if he didn't win, he'd go home. He put a chip on 16, which was his elder sister's age, but it didn't come up. Then on 12, which was his younger sister's, and that didn't come up either. He tried various numbers at random, but without success. It was funny. He seemed to have lost his knack. He thought he would try just once more and then stop. He won. He'd made up all his losses and had something over, which is when you quit, baby boys and baby girls. Not that I gamble. I haven't gambled very much. I have gambled, but it's rare that I gamble. I haven't been to the casino since they were so vicious just after my dog died. So fuck them. They'll never get my business again. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes. He'd made up all his losses and had something over. At the end of an hour, after various ups and downs, having experienced such thrills as he had never known in his life, he found himself with so many chips that they would hardly go in his pockets. He decided to go. He went to the changer's office and he gasped when 20,000 franc notes were spread out before him. He had never had so much money in his life. He put it in his pocket and was turning away when the woman to whom he had lent the 1,000 francs came up to him. "I've been looking for you everywhere," she said. "I was afraid you'd gone. I was in a fever. I didn't know what you'd think of me. Here's your 1,000 francs, and thank you so much for the loan," which I'm delighted to hear when a gambler returns money like that to another gambler. It's very, very fine, honouring thing to do. Nicky, blushing scarlet, stared at her with amazement. How he had misjudged her. His father had said, "Don't gamble." Well, he had, and he'd made 20,000 francs. And his father had said, "Don't lend anyone money." Well, he had. He'd lent quite a lot to a total stranger, and she'd returned it. The fact was that he wasn't nearly such a fool as his father thought. He'd had an instinct, that he could lend her money with safety, and you see, his instinct was right. And he was so obviously taken aback that the little lady was forced to laugh. "What is the matter with you?" she asked. "To tell you the truth, I never expected to see the money back. What did you take me for? Did you think I was a cocotte?" Nicky reddened to the roots of his wavy hair. "No, of course not." "Do I look like one?" "Not a bit." She was dressed very quietly in black, with a string of gold beads round her neck. Her simple frock showed off a neat, slight figure. She had a pretty little face and a trim head. She was made up, but not excessively, and Nicky supposed that she was not more than 3 or 4 years older than himself. She gave him a friendly smile. "My husband is in the administration in Morocco, and I've come to Monte Carlo for a few weeks because he thought I wanted a change." "I was just going," said Nicky, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. "Already? Well, I've got to get up early tomorrow. I'm going back to London by air." "Of course. The tournament ended today, didn't it? I saw you play, you know, 2 or 3 times." "Did you? I don't know why you should have noticed me." "You've got a beautiful style, and you looked very sweet in your shorts." Nicky was not an immodest youth, but it did cross his mind that perhaps she had borrowed that 1,000 francs in order to scrape acquaintance with him. "Do you ever go to the Knickerbocker?" she asked. "No, I never have." "Oh, you mustn't leave Monte Carlo without having been there. Why don't you come and dance a little? To tell you the truth, I'm starving with hunger, and I should adore some bacon and eggs." Nicky remembered his father's advice not to have anything to do with women, but this was different. You had only to look at the pretty little thing to know at once that she was perfectly respectable. Her husband was in what corresponded, he supposed, to the civil service. His father and mother had friends who were civil servants. So I'm trying not to laugh. And they and their wives sometimes came to dinner. It was true that the wives were neither so young nor so pretty as this one, but she was just as ladylike as they were. And after winning 20,000 francs, he thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a little fun. "I'd love to go with you," he said, "but you won't mind if I don't stay very long. I've left instructions at my hotel that I'm to be called at 7. We'll leave as soon as ever you like. Nicky found it very pleasant at the Knickerbocker. He ate his bacon and eggs with appetite. They shared a bottle of champagne. They danced, and the little lady told him he danced beautifully. He knew he danced pretty well, and of course she was easy to dance with, as light as a feather. She laid her cheek against his, and when their eyes met, there was in hers a smile that made his heart go pit-a-pat. A coloured woman sang in a throaty, sensual voice. The floor was crowded. Have you ever been told that you're very good looking? She asked rather. I don't think so, he laughed. Gosh, he thought, I believe she's fallen for me. Well, he's only 18. Give the kid a break. Nicky was not such a fool as to be unaware that women often liked him, and when she made that remark, he pressed her to him a little more closely. She closed her eyes, and a faint sigh escaped her lips. I suppose it wouldn't be quite nice if I kissed you before all these people, he said. What do you think they would take me for? It began to grow late, and Nicky said that really he thought he ought to be going. I shall go too, she said. Will you drop me at my hotel on your way? I've just had a flashback and a very brief momentary fragment of a memory. A very nice couple that came and danced with me one night, not that long ago, only a couple of months ago, at the Brooklyn Standard. She was Serbian and he was Australian of Irish descent. Very nice couple. Trying to remember their names now. I took particular note because they were just so lovely to me. Isn't it funny how that should just randomly pop into my mind right now? Never seen them again. It's not like we were friends or anything. How very odd though. He was a musician, he told me. I don't know which band he plays for. And she was so lovely to me. Huh. Maybe I'll run into them somewhere again. It's just weird how that memory should pop up. Anyway, sorry, I'm a bit psychic, so sometimes I move in and out of the space-time continuum and I'll have little reminders of things. I've had a lot of deja vu the last few days, which is a bit weird, but it happens from time to time. Me rehashing old stories too. I know, it's an old lady thing, isn't it? Dear Goddess. I'm sure I've told that story about Peter and the Viking at the Irish movies before, being one of my other videos, so look, honestly, I don't even know why people watch me on my YouTube channel the way I rave on sometimes. It's a bit odd. But, you know, what else am I going to do with my time but have weird memories and anecdotes and sometimes funny little encounters like that one. Nicky encounters with the Viking, not the married couple, you understand. Just realised how that sounded, by God. Well, anyway, Nicky paid the bill. He was rather surprised at its amount, but with all that money he had in his pocket, he could afford not to care, and they got into a taxi. She snuggled up to him, and he kissed her. She seemed to like it. By Jove, he thought, I wonder if there's anything doing. It was true that she was a married woman, but her husband was in Morocco, and it certainly did look as if she'd fallen for him. Good and proper. More like it was 20,000 francs, baby boy, but anyway. It was true also that his father had warned him to have nothing to do with women. But, he reflected again, he hadn't actually promised he wouldn't. He'd only promised not to forget his advice. Well, he hadn't. He was bearing it in mind that very minute. But circumstances alter cases. She was a sweet little thing. It seemed silly to miss the chance of an adventure when it was handed to you like that on a tray. When they reached the hotel, he paid off the taxi. "I'll walk home," he said. "The air will do me good after the stuffy atmosphere of that place." "Come up a minute," she said. "I'd like to show you the photo of my little boy." "Oh, you've got a little boy?" he exclaimed, a trifle dashed. "Yes, a sweet little boy." He went upstairs after her. He didn't in the least want to see the photograph of her little boy, but he thought it only civil to pretend he did. There's that weird smell again. Where's it coming from, people of Earth? God no, my windows are closed. It's not me. And my nose is quite stuffed too. It's like, how am I even smelling anything at all? Oh, well, anyway, it's probably the spirits. Honestly, wish they'd just leave me alone sometimes. I've got better things to do. I'm reading stories to the people of Earth. Take your smells and go. By the gods. Maybe I'm about to have a stroke. Anyway. He was afraid he'd made a fool of himself. It occurred to him that she was taking him up to look at the photograph in order to show him in a nice way that he'd made a mistake. He'd told her he was 18. I suppose she thinks I'm just a kid. He began to wish he hadn't spent all that money on champagne at the nightclub. But she didn't show him the photograph of her little boy after all. They had no sooner got into her room than she turned to him, flung her arms around his neck and kissed him full on the lips. He had never in all his life been kissed so passionately. "Darling," she said. For a brief moment, his father's advice once more crossed Nicky's mind, and then he forgot it. Nicky was a light sleeper, and the least sound was apt to wake him. Unlike that young man at the bloody food court today, by the gods. I really worried he'd drop dead on us. I really did. 2 or 3 hours later he awoke, and for a moment could not imagine where he was. The room was not quite dark, for the door of the bathroom was ajar, and the light in it had been left on. Suddenly he was conscious that someone was moving about the room. Then he remembered. He saw that it was his little friend, and he was on the point of speaking when something in the way she was behaving stopped him. She was walking very cautiously, as though she were afraid of waking him. She stopped once or twice and looked over at the bed. He wondered what she was after. He soon saw. She went over to the chair on which he had placed his clothes and once more looked in his direction. She waited for what seemed to be an interminable time. The silence was so intense that Nicky thought he could hear his own heart beating. Then, very slowly, very quietly, she took up his coat, slipped her hand into the inside pocket, and drew out all those beautiful 1,000-franc notes that Nicky had been so proud to win. She put the coat back and placed some other clothes on it so that it should look as though it had not been disturbed. Then, with the bundle of notes in her hand, for an appreciable time, stood once more stock still. Nicky had repressed an instinctive impulse to jump up and grab her. It was partly surprise that had kept him quiet, partly the notion that he was in a strange hotel in a foreign country, and if he made a row, he didn't know what might happen. She looked at him. His eyes were partly closed, and he was sure that she thought he was asleep. In the silence, she could hardly fail to hear his regular breathing. When she had reassured herself that her movements had not disturbed him, she stepped with infinite caution across the room. On a small table in the window, a cineraria was growing in a pot. Nicky watched her now with his eyes wide open. The plant was evidently placed quite loosely in the pot, for taking it by the stalks, she lifted it out. She put the banknotes in the bottom of the pot and replaced the plant. It was an excellent hiding place. No one could have guessed that anything was concealed under that richly flowering plant. She pressed the earth down with her fingers, and then, very slowly, taking care not to make the smallest noise, crept across the room and slipped back into bed. "Chérie," she said in a caressing voice. Nicky breathed steadily, like a man immersed in deep sleep. The little lady turned over on her side and disposed herself to slumber, but though Nicky lay so still, his thoughts worked busily. He was extremely indignant at the scene he had just witnessed, and to himself he spoke his thoughts with vigour. "She's nothing but a damned tart, she and her dear little boy, and her husband in Morocco. My eye! She's a Russian thief, that's what she is. Took me for a mug. If she thinks she's going to get away with anything like that, she's mistaken." He had already made up his mind what he was going to do with the money he had so cleverly won. He had long wanted a car of his own, and had thought it rather mean of his father not to give him one. After all, a fella doesn't always want to drive about in the family bus. Well, he'd just teach the old man a lesson and buy one himself. For 20,000 francs, £200 roughly, he could get a very decent second-hand car. He meant to get the money back, but just then he didn't quite know how. He didn't like the idea of kicking up a row. He was a stranger in a hotel he knew nothing of. It might very well be that the beastly woman, oh dear goodness, had friends there. He didn't mind facing anyone in a fair fight. but he'd look pretty foolish if someone pulled a gun on him. He reflected, besides, very sensibly, that he had no proof the money was his. If it came to a showdown, and she swore it was hers, he might very easily find himself hauled off to a police station. He really didn't know what to do. Presently, by her regular breathing, he knew that the little lady was asleep. She must have fallen asleep with an easy mind, for she had done her job without a hitch. It infuriated Nicky that she should rest so peacefully while he lay awake worried to death. Suddenly an idea occurred to him. It was such a good one that it was only by the exercise of all his self-control that he prevented himself from jumping out of bed and carrying it out at once. Two could play at her game. She'd stolen his money, well, he'd steal it back again, and they'd be all square. He made up his mind to wait quite quietly until he was sure that deceitful woman was sound asleep. He waited for what seemed to him a very long time. She did not stir. Her breathing was as regular as a child's. "Darling," he said at last. No answer, no movement. She was dead to the world. Very slowly, pausing after every movement, very silently, he slipped out of bed. He stood still for a while, looking at her to see whether he had disturbed her. Her breathing was as regular as before. During the time he was waiting, he had taken note carefully of the furniture in the room, so that in crossing it he should not knock against a chair or a table and make a noise. He took a couple of steps and waited. He took a couple of steps more. He was very light on his feet and made no sound as he walked. He took fully 5 minutes to get to the window, and here he waited again. He started, for the bed slightly creaked, but it was only because the sleeper turned in her sleep. He forced himself to wait till he had counted 100. She was sleeping like a log. With infinite care, he seized the cineraria by the stalks and gently pulled it out of the pot. He put his other hand in. His heart bet 19 to the dozen as his fingers touched the notes. His hand closed on them, and he slowly drew them out. He placed the plant, so he replaced the plant, and in turn carefully pressed down the earth. While he was doing all this, he had kept one eye on the form lying in the bed. It remained still. After another pause, he crept softly to the chair on which his clothes were lying. He first put the bundle of notes in his coat pocket and then proceeded to dress. It took him a quarter of an hour because he could afford to make no sound. He had been wearing a soft shirt with his dinner jacket, and he congratulated himself on this because it was easier to put on silently than a stiff one. He had some difficulty in tying his tie without a looking glass, but he very wisely reflected that it didn't really matter if it wasn't tied very well. His spirits were rising. The whole thing now began to seem rather a lark. At length he was completely dressed, except for his shoes, which he took in his hand. He thought he would put them on when he got into the passage. Now he had to cross the room to get to the door. He reached it so quietly that he could not have disturbed the lightest sleeper, but the door had to be unlocked. He turned the key very slowly. It creaked. "Who's that?" The little woman suddenly sat up in bed. Nicky's heart jumped to his mouth. He made a great effort to keep his head. "It's only me. It's 6 o'clock and I've got to go. I was trying not to wake you." "Oh, I forgot." She sank back onto the pillow. "Now that you're awake, I'll put on my shoes." He sat down on the edge of the bed and did this. "Don't make a noise when you go out. The hotel people don't like it. Oh, I'm so sleepy." "You go right off to sleep again." "Kiss me before you go." He bent down and kissed her. "You're a sweet boy and a wonderful lover. Bon voyage." Nicky did not feel quite safe till he got out of the hotel. The dawn had broken, the sky was unclouded, and in the harbour the yachts and the fishing boats lay motionless in the still water. On the quay, fishermen were getting ready to start with their day's work. The streets were deserted. Nicky took a long breath of the sweet morning air. He felt alert and well. He also felt as pleased as Punch. With a swinging stride, his shoulders well thrown back, he walked up the hill and along the gardens in front of the casino. The flowers in that clear light had a dewy brilliance that was delicious, till he came to his hotel. Here the day had already begun. In the hall, porters with mufflers round their necks and berets on their heads were busy sweeping. Nicky went up to his room and had a hot bath. He lay in it and thought with satisfaction that he was not such a mug as some people might think. After his bath, he did his exercises, dressed, packed, and went down to breakfast. He had a grand appetite. No continental breakfast for him. He had grapefruit, porridge, bacon and eggs, rolls fresh from the oven, so crisp and delicious they melted in your mouth, marmalade, and 3 cups of coffee. Though feeling perfectly well before, he felt better after that. He lit the pipe he had recently learnt to smoke, paid his bill, and stepped into the car that was waiting to take him to the aerodrome on the other side of Cannes. The road as far as Nice ran over the hills, and below him was the blue sea and the coastline. He couldn't help thinking it damned pretty. They passed through Nice, so gay and friendly in the early morning, and presently they came to a long stretch of straight road that ran by the sea. Nicky had paid his bill, not with the money he'd won the night before, but with the money his father had given him. He had changed 1,000 francs to pay for supper at the Knickerbocker, but that deceitful little woman had returned him the 1,000 francs he had lent her, so that he still had 20,000-franc notes in his pocket. He thought he would like to have a look at them. He had so nearly lost them that they had a double value for him. He took them out of his hip pocket, into which, for safety's sake, he had stuffed them when he put on the suit he was travelling in, and counted them one by one. Something very strange had happened to them. Instead of there being 20 notes, as there should have been, there were 26. He couldn't understand it at all. He counted them twice more. There was no doubt about it. Somehow or other, he had 26,000 francs instead of the 20 he should have had. He couldn't make it out. He asked himself if it was possible that he had won more at the sporting club than he had realised, but no, that was out of the question. He distinctly remembered the man at the desk laying the notes out in 4 rows of 5, and he had counted them himself. Suddenly the explanation occurred to him when he had put his hand into the flower pot. After taking out the cineraria, he had grabbed everything he felt there. The flower pot was the little hussie's money box, and he had taken out not only his own money, but her savings as well. Nicky leant back in the car and burst into a roar of laughter. It was the funniest thing he had ever heard in his life, and when he thought of her going to the flower pot some time later in the morning, when she awoke, expecting to find the money she had so cleverly got away with, and finding not only that it wasn't there, but that her own had gone too, he laughed more than ever. And so far as he was concerned, there was nothing to do about it. He neither knew her name nor the name of the hotel to which she had taken him. He couldn't return her money, even if he wanted to. It serves her damned well right, he said. This then was the story that Henry Garnet told his friends over the bridge table, for the night before, after dinner with his wife and daughter, when his wife and daughter had left them to their port, Nicky had narrated it in full. And you know what infuriated me is that he's so damned pleased with himself. Talk of a cat swallowing a canary. And do you know what he said to me when he'd finished? He looked at me with those innocent eyes of his and said, "You know, Father, I can't help thinking there was something wrong about the advice you gave me. You said, 'Don't gamble.' Well, I did, and I made a packet. You said, 'Don't lend money.' Well, I did, and I got it back. And you said, 'Don't have anything to do with women.' Well, I did, and made 6,000 francs on the deal." It didn't make it any better for Henry Garnet that his 3 companions burst out laughing. "It's all very well for you fellows to laugh, but you know I'm in a damned awkward position. The boy looked up to me. He respected me. He took whatever I said as gospel truth, and now I saw it in his eyes. He just looks upon me as a drivelling old fool. It's no good my saying 1 swallow doesn't make a summer. He doesn't see that it was just a fluke. He thinks the whole thing was due to his own cleverness. It may ruin him." "You do look a bit of a damned fool, old man," said one of the others. "There's no denying that, is there?" Is that strange scent again? Honestly, it's very odd. Oh, I know I do, and I don't like it. It's so dashed unfair. Fate has no right to play one tricks like that. After all, you must admit that my advice was good. very good. And the wretched... Oh, sorry, that's my phone telling me it's my bedtime. As if I ever obeyed an order in my life. You have to laugh. And the wretched boy ought to have burnt his fingers. Well, he hasn't. You're all men of the world. You tell me how I'm to deal with the situation now. But they none of them could. Well, Henry, if I were you, I wouldn't worry, said the lawyer. My belief is that your boy's born lucky, and in the long run, that's better than to be born clever or rich. Pardon me. The end. So, time is now 10:15 p.m. and that was a rather fun story, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did after my 40 minutes of musing about my own strange little anecdotes and encounters with cheap men and Vikings. But anyway, and yes, as I said earlier, I've had a lovely day, so quite tired now. So I bid you all good night, good evening, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. And I'll be back, no doubt, tomorrow with some more short stories by W. Somerset Maugham. Bye for now, people of Earth.